Morning. Good to see everybody out this morning. It's a rainy day, but still a nice weather we have today. I'm filling in for Zach this morning, so if you don't like my lesson, you can take it up with him. They are at the hospital right now. If you want easy, good work this week, give Cody a call because she said it's like prison without the yard time. So there's something you can do. She's calling me a lot, but it's a good work. The Bible commands us to visit the sick. So that's one thing. And I know Jeremy and D Davis need prayers too as their pregnancies. Having some complications. So keep that in mind as you go throughout this week. One more preliminary announcement. The pumpkin festival's this week. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Everybody knows. So I think that everybody in here should make an effort this year, as well as myself, to get out into the community this week. And one of our commandments is personal, as well as the church, is to evangelize and be a good influence in the community. And you can't do that if you're not in the community. And everybody's going to be out this week. So I know Mom and I are at the chamber meeting on Wednesday, and every business in town is having some kind of event or hosting. So, in rural communities, it's harder to evangelize than in urban communities because everybody knows everybody and everybody's known you your whole life. So use this as a good opportunity to rekindle old relationships, talk to people you haven't talked to in a while, and hopefully one thing leads after another and we get to be a good influence as we're commanded to do. So there's my one thought of that before we start. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about better safe than sorry. Who's ever heard this phrase before? I have. Dad tells me 3 times a day, usually after I screw something up. But the government and the police like to use this phrase. You'll see it all over the interstate, especially driving through Columbus, to prevent people from drinking and driving and to keep the roads safe. So this is a phrase we see often. And it also applies to religious lives, but I'm going to frame it in a way that we probably don't think of very much, because in the religious community, especially more conservative religious community, you hear people use this phrase a lot, saying that I think it's better to play the safe side. We better be safe than sorry. And I'm going to point out a few examples in the Bible, tell a few stories and places where I experienced this in my life and in the world, to put this in perspective and how we can apply this to our lives and change our outlook. So more of a lighthearted lesson, but first thing, this picture. So this is by the ocean. There's these rocks, and they are carved into perfect one of them shapes. Hexagons, we'll say that. And it's the only place in the world you can see that, because the way the volcanic stuff works and all that, they carve it in. Most science I ever had in my life was the baking soda and the vinegar. So I don't know how this works, but you got these rocks out there and they're by the ocean and they're amazing. They're 100 feet tall and you go out and see them. So we walk down this hill, it's about a mile. It's like 90 degrees. We're down there and everybody's out walking on them like toadstools, just hopping around on them. Ethan especially, he's out there jumping around. And I thought, everybody else is doing it. Why don't I do it? So I get out there, walking around, and there's seaweed. If you've ever seen seaweed before, it's slippery, but it was dry. So I was like, how can it be dry or slippery? It's dry. So I get out there, and boom, on my face, hands all bloody. And I got to walk a mile back up this hill in the 90-degree weather. So you might say to myself, if he was there, he would have said it. Better safe than sorry, right? You don't need to be walking around on them rocks. Well, that's a good example of where that works. In this situation, I should have saw there's dry seaweed on the rocks. I'm going to slip and cut up my hands if I do this. And what do you get out of it? Nothing. You're close to the rocks. You could have seen it from far away. Okay. Next story. If it goes. Okay. So just this past August, we were in Washington State, and Washington State has a lot of mountains, just like West Virginia, if you didn't know. And the last day, Sam, McKenna, and Ethan and I went up on this mountain, and we were going to hike this trail, which we thought it was just a straight out trail, not very high. But as we start climbing the hill, it starts wrapping around this mountain. And there's about this much room to walk on. Don't ask McKenna because she turned around. So there was slate covering the trail too. It was like quicksand. So it was there was a lot of circumstances where one wrong step could have sent you down the mountain and you'd have been done. But if you walk around that spiral, you get to the top and you get these views. You get to see Mount Baker to the right, 10,000-foot mountain covered in snow and glaciers. You get the mountain view from all around in Cascades National Park, and you couldn't see that from the bottom because you didn't have that perspective. So here's a situation where if I would have slept and fell off, I wouldn't have to worry about it, but I bet I would have been better safe than sorry. But in this situation, we took the risk, we went up the mountain with caution, and we got the better views. So there's two sides of the story of, well, maybe sometimes you take a risk, it pays off. Okay. Next example, I'm going to give a few worldly examples, and then we're going to talk about some biblical examples of this, and then how we can apply it. Okay, so we have farmers in the room. Every farmer knows it's not as common nowadays. So this is something I learned in my history class I thought was interesting, and I always remember it. So when you plant a field, not as common anymore because we have fertilizer, but you got to leave some stuff fallow, right, Gary? You got to have a fallow field and you got to have a planted field, because if you plant a field every year, it's going to run out of nutrients eventually. Like I said, fertilizer kind of changes things. So in the 13th century, well, let's see how this matters. They used to do fallow field, planted field, 50%, 50%. So that way each year you get half of the yield from your crop. That's good. They were getting somewhere on that. But then one day somebody said, what if we plant a third fallow? What if we leave a third fallow and then we leave half of it one crop and half of it another, or a third and a third? So we got 3/3, fallow, one crop, another crop. And you rotate. That way we're getting 2/3 of our land produced, not just half. So the reason nobody tries is because back then, and even now, some people, if you tried this and failed, your family starved and you died because there was no social welfare programs. There was no safety nets. Nothing. If you didn't produce crops that year, you did not eat. So somebody said, well, most people said, why would I ever try this? I don't know if it works. But somebody tried it. And then now we're producing 2/3 of our land in the whole country, in the whole United States. Imagine if we only used half of our land. We wouldn't have half the prosperity we do today. And then that goes down the chain. Then if less people are working the fields, more people can work in schools, in church, in the factories, and it just improves society. So in this example, this system, people took chances, took risks, and it improves society as a whole. One more worldly example. Sylvester Stallone. Everybody knows him. He's Rocky. He's a big boxer. So here's a story. I'll just read it. With a baby on the way and too little money to pay rent on his Hollywood apartment, Sylvester Stallone sat down and wrote the screenplay for Rocky in less than 4 days. Producers loved it and offered him big bucks to bring the story to life. But Stallone, as down and out as he was, refused to take any offer if he wasn't allowed to play the lead role in the film. His stubborn attitude landed him a far smaller paycheck that he could have earned for his screenplay, but the risk was well worth the reward. Rocky ultimately ended up pulling in millions of dollars and skyrocketing Stallone to fame. So here's an example. I'm sure a lot of people have heard this story. He was broke. He didn't have anything. He didn't have $1 in his pocket. He was getting kicked out of his apartment. He had a kid on the way. And these guys are sitting here saying, you got a great story. I'll take it. I'll pay you money, but you can't act in it. And he said, I'm not doing it. And he kept waiting, and he worked and scratched by until he finally landed this position. And now he's one of the most successful monetarily and accolade, however you want to say that with adjective, with in acting today. He's one of the biggest actors there is. And he waited and he took the chance and it paid off. So you could have said, well, you're better safe than sorry. What if you starve? What if you don't ever land a spot? He took that chance and he waited, and he's one of the biggest actors there are now. Okay, this is in the world. Who cares about that? Well, let's look and see some places in the Bible where this occurred. The call of Abraham. So there's a map there. We've been doing our map class on Wednesdays. We can add two things together here. So Genesis chapter 12, we'll read that. If you want to follow along in your Bibles. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it says, the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. They set out from the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. So most of us are familiar with this story. We got a guy named Abram, not Abraham yet, and he's living in a city in the Middle East, far away from Canaan, God's promised land. And as far as we know, if this is wrong, correct me at the end of the lesson, please. Abram had not had any miraculous interactions with God until that point. So here we have Abram, a faithful man, who gets told by God to pick up all you have, all the wealth you've built, all the relationships you've connected, and leave your people and go 2,000, I don't know we'll say 2,000 miles, because I think that's pretty safe. A long ways to this land where you don't know anybody, you probably don't speak the language, and just trust me, I got you. And Abraham did it, and he had faith. And when we look at it now, we think, yeah, Abraham would definitely do that. Look how far his family and his line went from this one commission. But if you put yourselves in Abram's shoes in that time, you just got a message from God, you're probably having some doubts. What if it doesn't work out? What if I get killed on the way? I got all my stuff. I'm going through a land I don't know anybody. This does not sound like a good deal. But Abraham had faith. He trusted in the trust that God has provided to us and Abram. I will protect you. I will make you into a great nation and bless you. And he went all that way. And the rest of the Bible follows. We got Isaac following him, and Jacob, and the 12 tribes, all as a result of Abram's commission. Next example. Peter walking on the water. I think I read this for an invitation a while back, but it's a good example of another place where we can put ourselves in Peter's shoes. In Matthew chapter 14, if you'd like to follow along, Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side. While he dismissed the crowd, after he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down on the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. So most of us here are familiar with this story as well, but there's a good lesson to take out of it. So we have Peter and the other disciples on a boat out in the Sea of Galilee. Now, it's not a big lake, but it's big enough to matter. It's miles across. And they see this thing out on the water, and they think it's a ghost. Now, put yourself in that situation. You're in a boat. It's large waves. If you've ever been out on the ocean or anything like it, water is scary. You get in the water, you don't know what's going to happen, especially if you're not a strong swimmer. So they see this thing, they think it's a ghost. And then Jesus speaks to them. So now they know what it is at least. But then you got Jesus saying, get in the water. Trust me, you can walk. Now, if we are all in that situation, ask yourself, how many of us would have stepped out into that 10-foot wave? I'd have been hard to do. That's taking your faith and putting it to the test, putting it in reality. We take it for granted because Peter floated. He stepped on solid ground when he hit that water, but Peter didn't know that at the time. He used his faith. He took a chance and went out and stepped on the water. He believed and he trusted what Jesus was telling him, and he went. So it would have been better for Peter to be safe than sorry if he sank. But guess what? He didn't. And we're going to apply that to ourselves too. We have to be able to take the chance to know whether what we're doing is going to work or not. But if we just do what we know, we'll never grow. If we never go outside that circle of safety, is the word we often use, the comfort zone, we'll never know how much we can grow. In Proverbs chapter 29, I think 29, and 25, it says, fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. Now, he used the word snare there. He didn't say a stumble. So I can just imagine, you see the narrow gate, and you see yourself tied back because you can't get there because of fear. You know, in the past 2 years, 3 years, we've seen this a lot in society, and more than ever because it's hard to deal with fear until it's actually put to the test. Was it Franklin Roosevelt said, only thing we have to fear is fear itself? That turned out to be true. The United States did pretty well in World War II, but if they took the fear and gave in to the demands, who knows what could happen. So you can see it coming back today. Got a COVID case here, got a COVID case there. People are like, well, we got to mask up. We got to go home. We better not go to the pumpkin festival because I could get COVID. I better not go talk to people and try to get my influence out there because what if I get COVID? And what if I die from that? What if? That's the question of the day. What if? That's not the charge that God has given us. God didn't say, never take a chance because you could fail. And we're going to see that culminate in the last parable we'll address here in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30, in a familiar parable of the talents that we read often. We're going to examine this and see what the message that Jesus has for us. And then we'll conclude with a couple other slides, and the lesson will be yours. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold. I think King James uses the word talents. And you know, when I was a kid, I used to think that meant like jumping or singing or something like that. It's a talent. What's that? A talent is a weight and measurement. Just like we use an ounce, we measure gold in ounces, they measured it in talents. And a talent's like, we'll say $1 million. It's probably not spot on, but it's close. So this guy got $5 million, $2 million, $1 million. So use that when going through. To another 2 bags and another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who would receive 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gave 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. We got to remember that. The master's going to return, and we're going to have to square up. The man who received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold as I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I know that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. He's trying to sell it. Look, I know you like to save your money, but he's trying to set it up. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. So here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on a deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the lesson that I've always seen from this in my life is that take the blessings God has given you and use them to do more good. That's true. That's probably the primary lesson. But the one thing I want you to take out of this parable today, if you've never thought of it, is that God, or Jesus especially, through God, and the same being, today says, do good with what God has given you, even if it means losing what God has given you. He said, I gave you $1 million. You could have given that to the bankers. They could have stolen that. You could have lost it that way. But do something. I gave you this bag. I believe you could do something with it. Take that bag and produce. Take the chance, even if it means losing it. God wants us to try. That is our job on this earth, is to try. We are not, on Judgment Day, going to be asked how many souls we converted. We're going to be asked if we tried, if we put the work in. Did we take the chance to go out to do this or do that, or whatever good work you set your mind on to produce for what God, taking what God has given us, taking our $1 million, which is us as people, and turned it into more. So that's the lesson we're going to take today. We'll close it out. We're going to tie it in with faith. Hebrews 11, chapter 1. Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now faith is confidence in what we found, in what we hope for, and assurance what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. So that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So faith is the aspect to fill in the blank there. Peter did not know that when he stepped out under the water that he was not going to drown. He had faith to cover the rest. Those guys with the 5 bags and the 2 bags didn't know they were going to make 5 more bags and 2 more bags. Faith covered the rest. Like it says here, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command. It's a lot of people, scientists like to theorize and speculate on how the universe was created. But no matter what computer programs you have, no matter what test you run, we can never know. We can't touch the universe. No one was there except God at the time, and we'll never know. But we have faith to fill in that blank. God tells us it occurred. Faith fills in the rest. So let that be what you take away from the lesson today. When you go throughout your life and you undertake good works and you do things, and when fear comes in the road, like COVID, or like you got a boss at work who is threatening you for trying to speak your religion out loud, or whatever threat faces you, if you let fear get in the road, you're going to be snared, and you're going to see the narrow gate, and you're going to be stuck back here in the rabbit trap. But if we let faith be that bridge to gap the fear to the work, it couldn't work out. And if it doesn't, like we said earlier, all God wants us is to try. That's our job, is to put an effort in, a respectable effort, and to produce if we can. So one verse just to leave you with, it's just to think about, James 4:14. While you do not know what will happen tomorrow, what is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We all have stories of people that we saw Monday and they were gone Wednesday. Everybody's got one of them stories. They never expected to be gone Wednesday. It just happens. And it can be you. You might think it's not until it happens. So don't wait. Don't put it off. Start today. So if anybody today needs the prayers of the congregation and has would like to discuss that with us, we can help you at this time if you have a seat up front, or if anybody in the congregation wants to become baptized today and be added to the Lord's church, we can take care of that as well if you come up front, or if you need to address us at another time, we can take care of that as well after services. So please stand as we sing the invitation song.